Good afternoon. Today is the 28th of June, although I'm not entirely sure what date it will be when you are watching this. I am with Mr. Andy Shaw,
Hello.
who is a friend of mine, and he's a massive petrol head and also a big fan of old 1960s and 70s television series.
Absolutely.
And we are on the Avengers Dead Man's Treasure Hunt, which is based in Borehamwood in Hertfordshire, next to Elstree Studios, where the Avengers and other series were filmed. Before you ask, it is a closed event. It's invitation only, and so no, you can't come and join us. You have to actually know somebody to get an invitation, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on your point of view. But we're going to be talking about some of the main cars used in the Avengers. We'll do another separate video about some of the sort of what I call the guest cars. But these are the cars that are used by the stars of the Avengers. And we're not talking about new Avengers this time. There is another video which I will put probably up there, which talks about the new Avengers. So at the moment we are in the village of Ridge, which is in Hertfordshire. It's sort of kind of between Borehamwood and South Mims. We are in the car park of the Old Guinea. We were going to park right outside a barn which is used in an Avengers episode, Dead Man's Treasure, but we couldn't quite find a space, so we parked around the corner. Ridge was used in a number of different episodes of old TV series of the 60s and 70s. It was used in Thingamajig in the Avengers as well as Dead Man's Treasure. It was also used in Return of the Saint episode, which is called Yesterday's Hero, and it was used in an episode of The Protectors. But today we're just focusing upon the Avengers and the main cars used in it. Now, The Avengers was broadcast from 1961 to 69. It was made by a company called ABC Television, or the Associated British Corporation. They were a broadcaster for the Midlands and the North at the weekend. They had a studio in Didsbury in Manchester. They also had a London studio complex in Teddington. And actually the first three series of The Avengers were based in Teddington. The Avengers was originally filmed on black and white videotape with film inserts like Doctor Who was in the old days, and it went to black and white 35mm film in 1965, and then it went to colour 35mm film in 1966 and 67, and it ended filming in March 1969 with 161 episodes. The videotaped episodes don't have a lot of cars in them, but we'll just cover those kind of quickly. But the other episodes, oh my gosh, Andy, there's a lot of lovely, tasty cars.
There's a lot to go at, isn't there?
There's a lot to go through.
Joseph, there's a lot to go at, yes.
There is, which is why we're just talking about the main cars used by the main stars in this particular video. We will do another video later on talking about some of those others. Let's just start with quickly the videotaped episodes, which are the first three series. What's 52 plus 26, Andy?
78.
Yeah, so 78 episodes of The Avengers were done on black and white videotape, but basically half of the episodes were done in that way. They were filmed at Teddington Studios, as I've said, and there were some film inserts in them. Kathy Gale, Honor Blackman, she was actually Steed's second partner, because The Avengers started off as like a detective type series in 1961, starring Patrick Macnee and Ian Hendry, and the reason why it was called The Avengers was because in the first episode, of which only 20 minutes actually exists, Ian Hendry plays a doctor by the name of David Keel, and his fiancée is murdered by a gang in the first episode, and Patrick Macnee, John Steed, a shady government agent, he comes along and he helps Keel avenge the death of his fiancée. Ian Hendry left in end of 61, and so he had two partners, the very, very sort of poorly remembered Julie Stevens as Venus Smith, and then Honor Blackman as Kathy Gale, and she was made a permanent member of the team in the third series. Yeah. Although it was a bit different in the day, it was a lot more serious. Towards the end, the Avengers got really weird, didn't it?
I think it was quite refreshing, actually. It was escapism, and people at that time, if you had a dull job or if you were sweeping up in a warehouse all day, every day, you could come home and you could watch a bit of glamour and you could escape from all of that. It was very much an escapism type show at the end, but at the very beginning it was supposed to be a serious police crime drama, and that's where they kicked off with Ian Hendry and Patrick Macnee as John Steed. But as things turned out, Ian Hendry left the show to do other things, and that left John Steed, and they built the show around John Steed and who was left.
Yeah.
Very successfully.
Yeah, I mean, the person who created The Avengers was actually Sidney Newman, who also created Doctor Who along with Verity Lambert. And Verity Lambert did work on one of the first series episodes. It doesn't exist anymore. Only about 3.5 episodes of the first series actually exist, which is bizarre, isn't it? It's like with the Doctor Who episodes of the day, they kind of just wiped them after they finished doing them.
Yeah.
But all the episodes of series 2 onwards do still exist, which is nice. So with these very early episodes, with the film inserts, they didn't have much time to do that. So we only really see effectively kind of 4 vehicles that are driven by the main cast in the first 3 series of The Avengers. Kathy Gale in one episode drives an MGA, which is called Mr. Teddy Bear. It's the first episode of the second series that was broadcast, and you also see that in Warlock, which was another episode of the second series. You'd hardly see it at all. I don't even know what number plate is. John Steed, he didn't start off driving vintage Bentleys. Oh no, he actually had, the first car you see him drive was a Triumph Herald 1200 Coupe in Warlock. You see it very, very briefly, and that's 7061 MK. It's hardly worth mentioning, but because they've completely this and I'm that sort of person, I will tell you. He did, however, drive 2 vintage cars in series 2 and 3. One was a 1937 Alvis Speed 25 in the episode called Traitor and Zebra. Have you seen that one, Andy?
No, I haven't.
Okay,
I've not seen that.
It's supposed to be in Wales, but it's kind of not because they have some bad accents. But that's CPT 75. I don't know if that exists anymore, actually. And in Don't Look Behind You, which you probably have seen, I imagine, it's a classic sort of Series 3 episode. It was later remade as the Joker in the 5th series,
right,
and in colour with Dyna Rig.
Right.
But in Don't Look Behind You, he drives a 1930 Lagonda 2-litre speed GK 3295.
Wow.
And that's the first 3 series of The Avengers pretty much done. That's great. Well, hopefully we'll get through the others as quickly as that. Oh, probably we won't. Never mind. Let's talk about Bentleys. So the quintessential Bentley that Patrick Macnee drives is probably the Bentley 3-litre from the mid-20s. And there's actually a lot of these. There are 6 Bentleys in total.
Wow.
What do you think of these old 20s Bentleys, Andy, and their part in the series?
I think it was all part of establishing who John Steed was. He was a man who was from a forgotten time where men were bright and courageous and decent and intelligent, and it was all very much based on the old kind of public school image. They were very, very decent chap. And that just, it set that backstory for Steed, that he still drove a Bentley, although he was quite a young guy. I think, when we get to the Diana Rigg period, I think Patrick was in his early to mid 40s. He's about 43 or something like that.
That's correct.
So he wasn't an old guy.
No.
But they were portraying him as being more older than he actually was, and I think that's where the Bentley came in. It helped establish his credentials, it helped establish his age. He was somebody from a forgotten time when things were better, and you look back in life and people always say the good old days, the old days are always better than now. The truth is they're not, but we always perceive it like that. So I think it was part of establishing his character. It's a fantastic car, it's a beautiful car. It is quite an inspirational car as well, and an aspirational car. So I loved it. I absolutely loved the Bentley.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've taken a ride in a very similar 20s Bentley, not exactly that one, actually two of these, 3-litre and what's called a 3.5, which was a 3-litre chassis and a 4.5-litre engine, and that was terrifying because it almost caught fire.
Oh, good Lord.
These old 20s Bentleys, they require such a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
They are very difficult to drive. Patrick Macnee in the series used to leave them in 3rd gear, and just he gets stuntman to do all the proper works. The handling. If you watch Dead Man's Treasure, which is the classic episode of The Avengers about cars, they do some proper stunts in them, and must have been terrifying.
Yeah.
Must have been absolutely terrifying to do that. And in fact, the first Bentley that I'm going to talk about is Bentley using Dead Man's Treasure. It's a 1924 Bentley 3 litre. All the Bentleys were green, and this one was used in the black and white film episode, which is the 4th series, and Dead Man's Treasure. It's a 3 litre with Van den Pla coachwork, because in those days you just bought a chassis from Bentley Motors and then took it to Van den Pla or wherever you wanted to make the body, and they put it on for you. There's also another very similar 24 Bentley 3 litre, XR6056. That version was UW4887. XR6056 and The Hour That Never Was in Manual Surrey Green.
The Hour That Never Was.
Yeah,
fantastic episode.
That is a fabulous episode.
And interestingly, at the start of the episode is based upon the fact that the Bentleys crashed.
Yeah, the crash. That's quite right.
But you never see the Bentley crash. You just see a Bentley in a state of
slight disrepair
with the big liftable covers up at the side of the engine. They never actually harmed the Bentley, did they?
I think in Positive Negative Man, which was another one of the Bentleys, they actually crashed a Bentley into like a ford and like a pond. And funnily enough, that's the first time you ever see it, and there's sort of smoke coming out of it. I don't know if the car was badly damaged or not. I don't know if you put it into a Ford and it's just above the axle line, whether or not that would damage it. I don't really know. Possibly not. We'll talk about that one sort of a bit later, but there were bits of damage occasionally done. In Dead Man's Treasure, for example, windscreen shatters on the Bentley when it's shot with a shotgun, and he has to drive kind of out the window like this because he can't see. So they might have done a bit of damage, but all the Bentleys and the Rolls-Royces later were hired from a dealership called Kingsbury Motors, which is a very familiar name to people who are into cars used in television series of the 60s and the 1970s. In The Fear Merchants, which is the first episode of the 5th series, filmed, it wasn't the first one broadcast, the first one filmed, because they were at Pinewood Studios, not Elstree, for 2 episodes. They used a different Bentley, which is a 25 3 litre green label, this YK6871. The 28 3 litre Bentley in Positive Negative Man, and right the way through to the early episodes of the last series, which is called Series 7 or Series 6, depending on I'm going to call it Series 7 actually, just to annoy people. That was YT3942. It also appears in New Avengers as well. There's a different Bentley with registration number UW4887 in the earlier 4 series episodes, the black and white film ones. We don't know what registration number of that one was, because for some reason it sort of disappears, and he gets other cars as well. But it's a different looking one. It's got sort of cycle type wings rather than flowing ones. The Bentley that's probably the most iconic one when you think about it, although it doesn't appear in that many episodes, comparatively speaking, is a 1930 Bentley 6.5 litre, also known as a Speed 6, which is RX6180, which is in the 5th series and some of the other 6 series episodes, which is a car episode with Diana Rigg. Do you remember that one? It's in ones like From Venus with Love and things like that. It's got one with a really long bonnet.
Do you know what, Joseph? All of the Bentleys looked very similar to me.
They're all the same colour, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all British Racing Green.
Absolutely.
And they're all a Bentley, and they're all vintage cars with a big handbrake on the side.
Yeah, those are a pain to operate. I've driven a car like that, and it was crazy.
I should imagine the road holding is not very good.
The tyres are about that wide, so it's not good.
Spoke wheels, everything on there 100 years old. Yeah.
I mean, in Death's Door, which is an episode from the 6th series, first time I filmed in the 6th series, they have this scary scene where the brakes fail on the Bentley and he's running down the hill, and like, oh my gosh, that would be just so terrifying. The brakes are just not good, and he sort of semi-crashes into a bush at the bottom of the hill. I wouldn't want to do that myself. Rocky Taylor, who was a stunt double of Patrick McNee, was a very, very brave man indeed. The other vintage car they used in the 4th series, which was black and white, episode of Diana Rigg on film, it's a 1924 Vauxhall 3098.
Wow.
That's used very briefly in the 13th Hole and also in The Gravediggers.
Oh, right.
Very classic kind of, Vauxhall used to make some sports cars like Bentley back in the day. They didn't just make Astras. It was interesting. right at the end of the sort of production of the Avengers in the 7th and last series, he went from driving a Bentley to driving a Rolls-Royce. Now,
Yes,
do you remember
yeah.
the yellow Rolls-Royce, Andy?
I do. Who could forget the yellow Rolls-Royce? It was an amazing car. I think they did some promotional shots or promotional film, didn't they, where they messed about with it for a day, and Diana Rigg ends up running after it as it rolls away or something.
Yeah, but
they round the fountain. It was one of those cars that I remember when I was little. My grandma had some placemats that were made out of metal, and they featured various vintage cars. And one of the vintage cars was a yellow Rolls-Royce, just like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Rolls-Royce you're referring to is actually an episode called the Sea-Free Man. It was filmed at Bewley. That's a Silver Ghost 1909. It's not the same one, but the yellow one is actually a Silver Ghost. It's just a much later one, which is KK4976. That's used in most of the episodes of the 7th series, although in 2 of the later ones, which are Thingamajig and Who's That Man I Saw You With, I don't really know why, but they had a different yellow Rolls-Royce, which is a Phantom 1, but the bodywork was by H.J. Mulliner, who also did the bodywork on the Silver Ghost. So yeah, I prefer the Bentleys. I'm a bit of a purist, and I like the Bentleys. My favourite one's probably the one in Dead Man's Treasure, although the one in Positive Negative Man and other sort of series 67 episodes is very similar, so I like those. But they're all beautiful old cars. He also drives a couple of Land Rovers. He drives a 61 Land Rover's 88 Series 2 in The Hidden Tiger, and in Never Never Say Die he drives a 1956 Land Rover Series 1 88 inch as well, which is VX897. But those are only seen quite briefly. Let's talk about Diana Rigg and her Lotus Elans. My gosh, I think it's probably in some ways an iconic car for the series. I mean, it's really hard to tell whether or not the Bentley or the Lotus Elan is actually the most iconic car in the Avengers. What would you say to that, Andy? Is your preference for the Bentley or for the Lotus Elan?
Blimey. Now that is a tricky one, isn't it? The Bentley, there must be so few of them. A very hard car to find even at a car show, and certainly an even harder car to own. You would be, gosh, what would you be? Hundreds and hundreds of £1,000s to go and buy one of those Bentleys. However, a Lotus Elan, that's the car there was a lot of them around. They were made out of fiberglass. They didn't rot like a traditional car did. I know the chassis and stuff were a different story, but there's a lot more Lotus Elans around. They're a lot more affordable. So I suppose today the Bentley's aspirational, whereas if you really wanted to own a Lotus Elan, you could do.
Oh yeah.
It's achievable.
Oh yeah.
But the Bentley, well, let's be honest, unless you've got the money of nobility behind you, it's probably not achievable, even if you sell your house. So, but I must admit, I do have a real fondness for the Bentley. I think it was perfect as John Steed's car, and a real quirky choice.
Oh yeah.
And it emphasised that quirkiness to his character.
I think so, and I wouldn't say I'd happily have one, but I'd like to just have have one on a classic car drive or something, provided you can get used to the fact that pedals are all the way around, which is a bit crazy. So Lotus supplied two Elans, one in the 4th series and one for the 5th and 6th series. The first one was HNK999C, and you see that all the way through the Blackout episode of Diana Rigg, and the second one was SJH499D, and you see that right away through to Mission Highly Improbable, which was filmed in September 1967. Also in the 7th of H2O, there's a Mini Moke, which I think was supplied by BMC actually, judging by the plate on it, which is BOX656C, and that's not the only Mini Moke that we'll talk about when we talk about all the cars used in the Avengers. So when Diana Rigg decided to leave in 1967, she was then replaced by an actress called Linda Thorson playing a character called Tara King, and she also initially got a Lotus, didn't she, Andy?
Yes, she got. I think initially she got. Was it a Europa?
No, it was an Elan Plus 2.
Right.
Which is only in 2 episodes.
Right, and then she moved on.
She did move on, and she moved on to a car that originally was going to be Patrick Meady's replacement car in the 7th series. And in Invasion of the Earthmen, you actually see him driving it. And
It wasn't by any chance purple, was it?
it was, yes, indeed, yes. And funnily enough, he'd already driven a car of this make before, back in The Sellout, which is a episode of Series 2. It was in The Sellout. It's an AC Greyhound, which was supplied by AC. They were in Thamesden, which is about 2 or 3 miles from Teddington. And this was an AC 428 Frewer. It was the pre-production car that was first built in 65 and modified a bit and registered in 66. So it was a bit of an old car by the time they came to start filming with it, which would have been in late 67. Although Patrick Mead didn't like driving it, so eventually they just gave it to Tara King because the deal with Lotus fell through for some reason. I'm not sure really what happened. It's because they changed producers halfway through the kind of sort of first bit of filming for the 7th series. And that one is LPH 800D. I kind of like it in a way, but I wouldn't like to drive it. I'm not sure that it would be very easy to control.
No. It's, I think, typical of cars that age. Other than the Lotus, which Colin Chapman had to have great road holding, great handling, a lot of the cars of that era were very poor handling in a competition environment. So if you're driving it quickly on a windy road, well, you were going to end up in a hedge, weren't you?
Yeah, you see a lot of that in the Avengers, and in Invasion of the Earthmen, Patrick Mead manages to sort of somehow like do a sort of 180 in the car and slide it into a hedge, which is quite impressive, really, considering how heavy the car was. Yeah. So after they got rid of the AC about halfway through the 7th series, she did then move on to a Series 2 Europa, pre-production Series 2 Europa. But just for completion's sake, I'll say that the Elan Plus 2 was NPW 999F, and the Europa was PPW 999F, a very similar registration to the car in The Spy Who Loved Me, for example, all supplied by Lotus Factory, which was in Heffel, Cheshunt originally, and then it moved up to Norfolk a little bit later on. What did you make of the Europa, Andy? Is that your sort of thing?
Well, it was so stylised. It had 70s sort of written all over it, didn't it?
Yeah.
I know we're not in the 70s at this point, but it did. It was an orange. It was in that
reddish orange colour,
flame orange type colour.
Yeah.
It was a fiberglass car. It had a flat back. It was like nothing else. There was nothing else that I can recall at that time that had looks anything like that car. It was an entirely different concept.
Absolutely.
For the market. And because it was fiberglass, they could pretty much do what they wanted. They had a lot of freedom with the styling of the car. Would it be my cup of tea? It was a very small car, and I think anyone who was tall would have really struggled to squeeze inside it.
Yeah.
But I bet you it had fantastic road holding. I bet it was very lightweight, so it just took off. It was really quick. And I bet it stopped quickly because of its lightweight. So I suppose it would have been a great performance car. It would have had the look of the period, but it dated because of all of those things, especially the look of the period. It dated very quickly. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my cup of tea really at Europa. Interesting car in the sense that it had electric windows. It was from the Series 2 onwards. It had a Renault engine for some reason. It had an engine on a Renault 16, which is bizarre. Lotus always seemed to use just until they got their own sort of twin cam engine later on, which was starting in the 60s and then going to the 70s. They used all kinds of bizarre engines initially. I'm not sure Renault's the sort of the best guarantee of quality to put in your car. I've been putting the Jensen Healey was even better because they stuck a Lotus twin cam engine into Jensen Healey, which I think was asking for trouble personally, but that was the 70s. That's the sort of thing that they did. Just to sort of tidy up things before we finish this video, and then we'll record a second one about the sort of guest cars in the series a bit later. Mother, who was the Steed's boss and Tara's boss for the 7th series, played by Patrick Newell. He had some interesting methods of conveyance, didn't he, Andy?
One of which was a submarine, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a submarine. That would be in They Keep Killing Steed.
Yeah.
but even in the cars, I mean, he had a mini moke in the episode Fog that was like multicoloured. I think it's THX 77F, that one. And then in the episode False Witness, he had a 1954 Leland Titan bus, which is OLD 666. And he invented the bus stop just for himself. So yeah, it was that's quite a famous bus apparently. I'm not really big on buses, but apparently that one's quite well known. And they also had his own Bentley, which is seen in the episode Super Secret Cipher Snatch, and I think that's 3KHM registration number of that one. It's like a Continental type one. Finally, we've got a sort of guest character's car, just because I really like this one. For one episode, which is called Killer, where Linda Forson went on holiday, her character was replaced by a lady called Jennifer Croxton, who was playing a character called Lady Diana Forbes Blakeney, and she had an MGC.
Yes, yeah.
That was not the best idea, was it, the MGC, Andy?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it was a good seller, wasn't it?
Well, no, they didn't. MGB was a big seller. The MGC was the Austin Healey 3000 engine put in the chassis of an MGB.
I thought they did okay. I'm not an expert on MGCs.
Well, with the V8 engine, which they put in later in the MGB V8, was a bit better, I think.
That gave the car... The problem with the car was it never had the performance that it looked like it had.
No.
So you looked at it and you thought, this is a sports car. But what you got was a pottering around sort of like saloon-type pace car.
That's right.
Until they put the V8 in it. And that was the eureka light bulb moment where all of a sudden the car was as quick and performed as well as it looked like it would. So yes, the V8s are amazing and they are the most popular cars.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the B series engine, which dates back to the early 50s originally, I'd say the performance of that is modest. That's why a lot of people swap it out.
Yeah.
The MGC, I mean, you used to be these big bonnet bulge on the MGCs to put the six-cylinder engine in. It didn't really give the car much performance, and it made the car understeer quite badly, although it looks interesting anyway. I saw one at Bewley when I was there in April. The plate on this one, which is a white one, was BWM 300G, although we believe that's a fake plate. We don't think it's a real registration, although it's a 68 model, which is when they came out. I think for now, I think we're probably going to take a break there, and we'll go and record the second part of the Cars of the Avengers somewhere else. So I hope you found that video informative. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a comment below and to like this video. If you wish me to source a car for you, it could be one of these lovely old 60s cars, or it could be something else entirely. Please visit my website, which is www.lloydvehicleconsulting.co.uk. There's a contact tab on the homepage there for you to get in touch with me directly, and also I have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. Thank you ever so much indeed for watching.